The Summer Games Minute, brought to you by Mass Mutual. For most professional athletes, versatility means they can play a few different positions in a single sport. For Babe Dietrichson-Zaharias, versatility means dominance across the entire spectrum of sport. In the 1932 Summer Games in Los Angeles, Zaharias won gold in the 80-meter hurdles and the javelin throw, plus she got a silver in the high jump. Running, throwing, jumping wasn't enough for Babe, so she became a competitive billiards player, then jumped into professional golf, winning 10 major championships, all the while making a few pitching appearances in Major League Baseball spring training games. Mass Mutual understands the nuances in how women want and need to manage their finances. With quality product solutions and guidance, a Mass Mutual financial professional can help you plan for both short-term and long-term money goals. Learn more and get started at massmutual.com.
As you've probably heard by now, we've teamed up with BetMGM this season. We'll be using BetMGM lines to make all of our picks, and we'll have special offers for our listeners each week. If you haven't signed up for BetMGM yet, use bonus code The Athletic, and you'll get a 1-year subscription to The Athletic, plus up to a $1,500 first bet offer on your first wager with BetMGM. Here's how it works. Download the BetMGM app and sign up using bonus code The Athletic. Make your first deposit of at least $10. Place your first bet on any game and claim your voucher for a 1-year subscription to The Athletic. See BetMGM.com for terms. U.S. promotional offers not available in D.C., Mississippi, New York, Nevada, Ontario, or Puerto Rico. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Available in the U.S. Call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369 in New York. Call 1-800-NEXT-STEP in Arizona. 1-800-327-5050 in Massachusetts. 1-800-BETS-OFF in Iowa. 1-800-270-7117 for confidential help in Michigan. 1-800-981-0023 in Puerto Rico. First bet offer for new customers only in partnership with Kansas Crossing Casino and Hotel. Don't forget, if you haven't signed up for BetMGM yet, use bonus code The Athletic, and you'll get a 1-year subscription to The Athletic, plus up to a $1,500 first bet offer on your first wager.
When you need mealtime inspiration, it's worth shopping Kroger, where you'll find over 30,000 mouth-watering choices that excite your inner foodie. And no matter what tasty choice you make, you'll enjoy our everyday low prices, plus extra ways to save, like digital coupons worth over $600 each week. You can also save up to $1 off per gallon at the pump with fuel points. More savings and more inspiring flavors make shopping Kroger worth it every time. Kroger, fresh for everyone. Fuel restrictions apply.
The Athletic.
Business as usual as Porsche wins Formula E season opener. Buemi rolls back the years with Envision podium. Cassidy takes first blood in Kiwi Jack fight. Launch control controversy or red herring. It is a boring race, cause for concern. Plus, we hear from Mahindra team principal Frederic Bertrand. Yes, we're back. The Formula E season 10 is with us, and here we are with the Race Formula E podcast, and fresh back from altitude sickness and probably trying to keep himself awake with some mezcal during the race. It's our Formula E correspondent, Sam Smith. Sam, how you doing?
I'm good, thank you. Yeah, no mezcal for me this year, which is a rarity, but yeah, it was quite good. We had an erupting volcano at one stage, so only in Formula E do we get these incidents. But it was a bit of an eye opener, that one. But yeah, generally a good start to the season. Off track, lots going on, but on track, as we saw, not a lot going on. But we'll pick the bones out of what did occur this last weekend.
Well, first up, to give you some credit where credit's due, in our pre-season pod, you said that Porsche were going to win the opener, and there were 4 cars which could have done it, but only one was anywhere close, and actually Pascal Wehrlein made light work of it, didn't he? It was an easy win.
Yeah, I mean, the big difference for Porsche, certainly on Wehrlein's side of the garage last weekend, was the qualifying pace, was the 1-lap pace, which was much better than last season. I mean, his previous best in a Gen 3 car at all was 3rd in Jakarta. Couldn't believe that stat, actually, but it's his first pole and his first front row. So he qualified an average of 9th last season, which clearly was a big part of why the second phase of the season, he sort of fell away from the championship fight. So, yeah, 2024 started out super well, similar to 2022 when he won, of course, Porsche's first race in Mexico City. So, very hard to beat a Porsche at the Autodromo Hermanos Rodriguez. They have an affinity with it. They know how to get that car and their team dialed into that place. And it worked super well. Wehrlein had a new engineer in Mexico City. Fabrice Roussel took over from Carl Wilson-Clark, which just shows actually just how well drilled the Porsche team is that Fabrice can plug in there after a season seconded to Andretti. So well done to all that side of the garage. He was pretty peerless. It didn't feel at any stage during qualifying of the race that it was going to be any other outcome. He hammered in a succession of quick laps when he had to after the safety car, got a gap to Sebastien Buemi and got the attack modes out early. And it wasn't a complete cakewalk because he had to get that gap, but it wasn't as if he was put under a whole lot of pressure during that race at all. So, one of the more simple victories for Pascal Wehrlein. So well done to them.
I guess the only sort of cloud that hung over it was this sort of potential technical infringement that was going to be looked at. What was that all about? Because it was quite hard to get your head around it if you were just a layman watching it on TNT Sports.
Yeah, I mean, initially the presumption was that it was actually tyre pressures, but it soon became clear that it was something more intricate, let's say. What it turned out to be was that there was a question mark over their primary throttle map, which is a homologated system that they have with the FIA. So they have to have a homologated pattern to essentially their acceleration. And when there's a spike in it, the FIA can see that through their through their infrastructure that they have back in the FIA garage, and that obviously raised suspicion of something at the start.
Right, so what's this launch control then? Was that what they were suspecting?
Fearing? Officially, nothing has been said other than it was to do with the primary throttle map. But everyone I have spoke to says that it was to do with the launch off the grid. Now, if you go back and you look at their starts, both Wehrlein and Jake Dennis got colossally good starts. Now, that might just be the great reactions of the drivers and a nice start, but certainly it did raise some suspicion. It was investigated, and the result remained provisional until 4 hours after the race. So whatever investigation was going on was pretty detailed and forensic. What I'm told was that there was an FIA official, a senior one actually, who's just started, Thomas Chevouche, who moved over from Stellantis Motorsport to join his former boss at DS, Xavier Mestalampinon, and Marek Navareki, actually, who are all old Citroen and old PSA colleagues together. So, he joined for Mexico City and was, I think, leading the investigation into the alleged suspicion of something. But nothing was actually proven. So it was dismissed and no further action was taken, and Wehrlein's win stood. Now, if you look at what Formula E, the history of Formula E and how they have managed it, so the obvious thing to say is that traction control is not allowed in the championship. But certainly in Gen 2, it was almost an open secret that some teams, or pretty much all of the teams, were using, let's call them ersatz systems on the car.
Vectoring, wouldn't they, or something like that?
Yeah, I mean, it's really hard to police, or it certainly was then. From that time, the FIA have invested in a range of devices and systems to try and eradicate the possibility of mimicking traction control, and that has taken the effect of some torque sensors and these primary throttle maps that they use, so that they can see in great detail how the cars are accelerating and managing their power. Now, within these perimeters, obviously, what happened last Saturday in Mexico, something happened. Otherwise, they wouldn't have bothered investigating it. Interestingly, Norman Natto. So all the Porsches were reported. Norman Natto's was dismissed within the race, which I kind of struggled to understand why his was dismissed immediately, but then Dennis and Wehrlein's went on after the race for 4 hours. But we have to go with the decision. We have to state that there is no offence to speak of here, but certainly was a very interesting point. And speaking to some of the rival team managers and team principals after the race, I sort of did a bit of a paddock sweep to get their opinion of it. The strong suspicion was that there was something amiss and there was something not quite right. So I expect this to sort of rumble on to De Vries, actually, and for the other teams to try and get some clarity over this decision and these methods about this incident. But like I say, officially, Pascal Wehrlein is the winner of that race, and there was no infringement, technical or otherwise, made by Porsche.
Yeah, it'd be fascinating to see what happens in De Vries, both in terms of how those cars get off the line, but also whether they trigger the same sort of sensor reaction or whatnot, because was it 2 weeks? Okay, you could reprogram the software in that time, but it's very little time to do much. So I guess we'll have an answer then, because if there is something there, then the other teams will all protest, won't they?
Yeah, I mean, there's a great deal going on. There's a lot of politics involved in Formula E at the best of times, but I can sense a bit of a fervour mounting. Porsche and the FIA do have a bit of history from London last year. Remember Antonio Felix da Costa's penalty, where he got a tyre cut and the tyre pressure went under the minimum pressure, so he got penalised, which Porsche found extremely unfair and unsatisfactory, and they took it all the way to the they took it all the way to the International Court of Appeal, didn't they? And as is always the case, it gets thrown out. But I just sense that there is I sense that it isn't an easy relationship between Porsche and the FIA with that case study and potentially with what happened in Mexico last weekend. But let's wait and see. It may all be forgotten, and it may just be it may have just been an irregular spike that needed to be addressed and explained, and obviously to the extent of it not being a sanctionable penalty, then that is the case. The Wehrlein is the winner, and I'm sure from Porsche's perspective, it's drawn a line under that race, and they move on to Saudi.
So putting that aside, Wehrlein, like you say, did everything he needed to do, built up the gaps when he needed to. I think the team executed their race strategy with the attack mode pretty much, spot on. What happened to the other three Porsche-powered cars? I mean, they were effectively nowhere.
It was a bit of copy and paste from last season in terms of Antonio Felix da Costa. I did a sort of wide-ranging interview with him the week before Mexico City, and it felt like the resurgence or the renaissance was coming.
Well, you tipped him for the championship,
I banged that nail into his coffin for 2024 as well. So sorry for that. No, he had a difficult weekend again. Qualifying didn't work out for him. He qualified, I think, down in 16th. Which is a poor starting position, and especially at Mexico City, which is extremely difficult to overtake. The chances were,
especially if you're going to pull off a move like he did. I mean, even being charitably, that was optimistic.
I think that was part of the problem. He needed to make up positions, and he took one gamble too many with Nico Mueller. He explained to me afterwards that he had tried a move the lap before and it hadn't come off, so he presumed that Nico would relent and didn't. So with it being essentially a flat out race, you're under no obligation to let people pass and think about it later. You have to, it's a bit like a traditional single seater race. You have to really fight for your positions in Mexico, and unfortunately Nico defended stoutly, and both of them suffered. I think ultimately you have to say that the stewards got it right, that Antonio was just a little bit too optimistic, and he got a 3-place grid penalty for De Vries on that, so compounded his wounds really. And
to be honest with you, I would prefer it if we weren't dishing out penalties willy-nilly like that, but if they're going to, then that deserved one.
Yeah, it ruined Mueller's race. He did recover, but it wasn't quite the same for him after that from a handling perspective. So, yeah, it's fair enough. I think Antonio afterwards was, he was pretty sanguine about it. I think deep down, he realised that ultimately he caused the accident, although it always takes two to tango in a sense, doesn't it? But I think in the the general consensus was that Antonio just made a bit too much of a desperate move and it didn't come off, which was a shame. So Andretti, I mean, they really surprised me actually, because they won at a relative canter with Jake Dennis last season. And was expecting, I think everybody, including them, were expecting a bit more. So it was a bit of a disaster for them in terms of what they should have had in Mexico City. They ultimately sort of tied themselves in a bit of a knot. They went with what Jake Dennis told me is they went for a software change on the car for free practice and qualifying, and it didn't really pay off at all. And they then reverted to the race to a different setup. I mean, Jake made a small error at turn 9 in qualifying, which meant that he was midfield start, good early progress. He was up to the periphery of the top 10, and then he just plateaued because of the difficulties, which we'll come on to shortly, about how difficult it is to get past at Mexico City. So you can have all the pace in the world and all the hooked up speed in the world, but you're not going anywhere at that track. And that's what happened to Dennis. So very frustrating for him. I mean, the one, I think, speaking to Roger Griffiths afterwards, the one big positive from his perspective was that they finally are a two-car team in terms of fighting for points, because Norman Nato finished just behind Jake Dennis and nicked a point in 10th place. So, yeah, a bit of light at the end of the tunnel for them, but they'll be hoping that they can get back to their strong 2023 form via Dennis and his new teammate for De Reer in a week's time.
I mean, there's absolutely no need to panic. I mean, I remember this time last season we were watching Wehrlein build up what looked like it could be an insurmountable lead, and in Formula E things can change so quickly. But it's just you don't want to throw points away, do you? And I think you're right that they'll want to bounce back in Saudi and produce something a little bit more respectable than that.
If you have a bad day at the office and you get two cars in the points, albeit at the other end of the big points, then you're doing all right, aren't you? So I think they'll come back quite strongly. That they realise that they sort of made a rod for their own backs in some of the things that they chose last weekend, and it didn't quite happen for them. So yeah, I think they're going to be back. They were really strong, or Dennis was really strong in Saudi last season. So I don't think there's anybody's panicking just yet.
Another thing that we talked about in the pre-season one was how strong Envision would be this season, and the general feeling was among all of us that they probably wouldn't be quite as strong as they were the previous year. Yet Buemi completely rolled back the years, as I said in the intro, to put up a really strong run for second place and looked like the guy who'd been arguably the quickest driver of the Gen 1 era again.
Yeah, he did, and to be fair to Seb, he had a really strong season last season. It was the results were masked really by things out of his control. He probably should have been fourth in the championship by rights, and his performances again had a really strong start to the weekend. Got things going from an early stage. Got into the final. Just lost out to Wehrlein, but certainly he looked like the strongest Jaguar-powered driver for the entirety of the meeting. The safety car cost him a bit. I mean, that's not an excuse, and I don't think he would have been able to challenge Wehrlein anyway. But obviously, he lost what little gap that he had at that stage as well. He mentioned a mistake in the media pen when I spoke to him afterwards, but he didn't elaborate on that, and I didn't see that.
I was going to ask about that, if you had any more clarity about this.
Yeah, it was hard to see. TV cameras didn't obviously pick it up, but presumed that he'd made a mistake and lost a bit of momentum to Wehrlein after Wehrlein had got through during the attack mode phase, the second one. So but really strong. I mean, he was really pleased with the strategy. He's working really well with he's got quite a young engineer, Connor Somerville, who's doing a fine job there. Their strategist, Harry Jones, was really thanked by both Connor and Sebastien over the radio towards the end of the race. So I think he was the only driver who looked like maybe having a little claw at Wehrlein, but just didn't have enough ultimately at the end of the day. But I think going back to Wehrlein, I think the big question now is, can he can he maintain a whole season? That's the whole question now, isn't it? I mean, he will probably end up having a similar strong start to the season as he did last campaign, but can he actually sustain it? And who's going to have the whip hand at De Vries? Because Jaguar were good last year in Saudi, but not quite on Porsche's level. But I think what they've learned through the first Gen 3 campaign, I expect it to be really close between Porsche and Jags at Saudi, and I think we'll get a real wheel-to-wheel battle, which we didn't necessarily get in Mexico.
In the second Envision car, making his sort of return to the team, Robin Freins had probably a weekend that he won't be spending too long thinking back on. Quite a strange-looking crash. Was that just a bit offline and a bit too much of a heavy foot? Or was there actually something technically wrong with the car?
No, there was a bit of suspicion from Robin initially that something might have gone awry with the car, but speaking to Sylvain Philippe after the race, he just got slightly offline, and it's super dusty on the exit of that as they come out of the Forosol complex, and Robin was making up for a really bad start as well, which I believe wasn't his fault. There was some kind of error in the way that he got off the grid.
Well, he definitely didn't have launch control, did he?
No, he didn't. There was no point in investigating that one, but he really bad start, which was a shame because he had the pace in free practice and wasn't quite there in qualifying to the extent that Buemi was, but he it was I think a combination of making up for that bad start, pushing too hard. I think he got slightly blindsided by Edo Mortara after he'd taken the attack mode and got on the dusty bit and was straight in the wall. I mean, when the team radio through to him and said, "Are you all right?" he initially said no, and I thought, "Oh my God, not again." Not after last season. He's not going straight to the... And the irony was that the surgeon who had done the operations on him, I spoke to Robin and the day before, and he really nicely got him sort of VIP tickets to go and see the race, he and his wife. Wow. So I thought, oh my God, well, at least he's there. If he's done his hand in again, at least he's at the track.
Let's hope he had a couple of mezcals over at lunch as well.
Yeah, I mean, tough one, but Robin Freins is the kind of driver who bounces back pretty quickly, and I think ultimately he'll look back on it now and think, okay, I put it in the wall when he's back in a competitive situation, but he's going to have several more of those chances this season. Whereas last season, there was absolutely no question he was going to be around the podium area. So I think from his frame of mind, he's in a much better place this season.
Nick Cassidy with the final podium spot. Probably this most interesting inter-team battle on the grid. I think we're all, this is going to be one of the brilliant subplots of the season. How important is that for him, to kick off in that way? And what happened to Mitch? Was there, because he seemed to be over-consuming in a way that sort of hinted that there might be an issue?
Well, you're right, it was a strong debut from Cassidy. Big cat debut. I thought he did a great job. Wasn't easy for him. It was quite difficult for him in free practice. He had struggled with traction issues in Sector 3 and was losing a lot of time there. They managed to get on top of that and come back pretty strong and look good in qualifying. They obviously had this situation where both Nick Cassidy and Mitch Evans lost a grid position. They got a 1-place penalty for not going into their boxes in free practice after there had been a red flag, which was a little bit contentious because the teams were told in free practice 1 to use the attack charge infrastructure. So I think there was a bit of a mix-up with that because they had to use it twice, I think, during the session. And it all felt a little bit harsh, to be honest, for a regulation that had just recently changed. But ultimately, it's a black and white, much like their car. It's a black and white regulation issue, and they got docked that one place. I don't think it had a massive impact on where they finished.
They won't do it again, though, I bet.
Well, no. With the attack charge, they actually scrapped it for free practice 2.
Okay.
There was some issues with it, so the teams were told not to bother using them for the second free practice session. So there's obviously a lot of question marks over that, and we do think now that the earliest it will be seen is Misano, as we suggested a couple of weeks ago. But going back to the Jaguar guys, Cassidy got stronger and stronger during the weekend, and by the end of it, got that podium. I think he'll feel a bit disappointed that he wasn't able to challenge Buemi in a similar car. Mitch's issues stemmed, I think, from two things. I chatted to him afterwards. The first thing was his rear tyres were overheating, which they tend to do through the Peraltada, and he was really suffering with overheating rear tyres, rear Hancocks. But he also mentioned a strange steering issue. The steering went really heavy, which he couldn't really explain specifically, but whether that was related to the sort of vehicle dynamic changes on the car through the tyres or not, they'll be investigating that. But he said it was a super strange thing that he'd never had before, so you presume some issue maybe around the rack or something, and it just hindered him, and his pace just dropped off. I mean, he ultimately went into defensive mode against Jean-Eric Vergne, who was harrying him for that 5th place. So yeah, he had no pace at all, and was quite a big chunk from Cassidy at the end. So clear issues for Mitch during that race.
For the neutral observer on that, that's probably the best way for that battle to start, with Cassidy coming in and taking control or taking first blood in that, rather than Mitch getting it. Because I mean, I'm sure that the fight back will be swift. There's no way that this is going to be a one-sided battle, is it?
No, and I just talking to both of them and speaking to the team, it's clear that they are very, very good friends and that they do work well together. It was noticeable in the sort of first 10, 12 laps of that race that they were working together. They were essentially towing each other around for that phase of the race. I mean, part of me, the sort of journalistic part of me, wants to see a great scrap and a fair one, and see, a tooth and nail thing going on, and possibly we will get that. But my feeling is that won't come until much later in the season, because I think they are clued up enough to realise that they, in a sense, they kind of need each other, and Jaguar really want to get that team's title, and they really want to. Obviously, the drivers want to win the drivers' championship. That goes without saying, but I think for a 3rd and a 5th place finish, when you've also got 4 Porsches that you're racing against, and only one of those Porsches is ahead of you, I think it's quite a strong weekend for Jaguar. I think they'll be a bit miffed that Guenther was between them, because I don't think anyone forecast that. But that was ultimately because of this strange issue with Evans's steering. So yeah, I think it's a really strong start from Jaguar, and I didn't see any hint of any sort of animosity, that's the word I was looking for, or any kind of coruscating presence in that garage. Quite the opposite, actually. It seems to be working pretty well at the moment.
I think right up until potentially the final round, that'll all be fine. We'll come back to Guenther in a few minutes when we do the sort of rest of the point scorers, but there was no escaping the fact that was a very boring race. I mean, almost nothing happened. So why is that? Because we've had cracking races there in the past. Is the attack mode just not strong enough? Was there some sort of headwind that we weren't aware of that was preventing them from doing it? But it seemed that you couldn't even get close enough to make an overtake feasible, let alone pull it off.
Well, ultimately, it's quite boring to watch. Those are my words. Those are the words of Jake Dennis. When the reigning champion tells you that after the race, then you got to listen. And he's exactly right. It was a bit of a dud, and those are rare in Formula E. Yeah. And what makes it all the worse is you've got 40,000 people there expecting to be entertained, and it's the first race of the season, and there's no other motorsport on, and it was Formula E's time to shine.
Open goal.
And it didn't. And if you're calling it an open goal, then it was missed, wasn't it? So there's two main reasons. The first one is the track itself. It's the configuration of it, with a long, quick right-hander, the Peraltada, as it should be known, not the Nigel Mansell corner.
No, I think even Mansell would agree with that.
Due deference to Nige, but it is the Peraltada, albeit a shadow of its former self. It's still a challenge. And then you've got quite a short straight, followed by a tight right-hander, which is tight but actually quite quick. It's not a traditional 90-degree street circuit kind of corner. Then you've got a hairpin and an artificial chicane on the back straight, which was installed there to have a braking area for the regen. And then you've got this Forest complex, which is superb for the fans, this massive, expansive terrace. But it is extraordinarily Mickey Mouse with 2 left-handers and then a right feeding on, and it's stop-start, and they've put the attack mode in there, which, doesn't work anyway, as it used to. So you've got a lot of issues there, but the fundamental problem of why that race was particularly dull with very limited overtaking was probably 25% the track, but ultimately 75% because it was a flat-out race.
Yeah.
And the usable energy which was given, which is the energy allowance, which is kilowatts per hour, was 38.5. Now, the FIA had reduced that from 41 kilowatts last season, but they had shortened the race by a lap, and I never got a satisfactory explanation as to why they'd shortened the race by a lap anyway. So ultimately what happened is that there is no particular lifting and coasting and energy saving. Obviously, they hit their energy targets with what they have, but there was no overt saving of energy. So getting clear opportunities for leapfrogging your rivals was very difficult. And then obviously it gets to a point pretty much halfway the race where it's going to be, if there's no safety cars or race or yellow flags, full course yellows, then you are going to have a flat out race, and that's exactly what happened. So very difficult to make a move. I don't think anyone in the I think there was one move in the top 5. I mean, I'm talking about non-attack
mode.
Yeah.
I can't. Who was that?
It would have been
Guenther on Evans.
Or was it Cassidy on Guenther?
Cassidy on Guenther. No,
I think it was Cassidy. I'd have to check that, but there was very, very few. I mean, Jake Dennis made, I think, 4 positions or 5 positions from his
we didn't see
grid
them,
start.
Did we?
No. And apart from that, there were the failed attempts we talked about with Mueller and Costa, and that was about it. So not a lot to get excited about, and it became very clear with 10, 12 laps to go that the finishing order, that was the finishing order. There was going to be very little chance. So what do? They have to look at the changes. There must be changes because on both of the things we talked about.
Is there any logic in running Formula E on the full track there, or is that just too energy sapping and too long to make it viable?
I think it's just too long. I mean, I think they use about 60% of the straight, so there's still 40% to go. What they can do is they can change the first corner. That's a blank canvas. They can do
tighten up.
They can do whatever they want there. Could they get rid of that artificial chicane on the back straight? Possibly, but then that you then don't get a braking area. But so what? I mean, let them go for it and get a bit more of a adjust the laps of the race and the kilowatt hours available. It's not difficult, and the FIA has a simulation group where they can do these studies. But certainly every single driver that I spoke to after the race said the same thing, that a combination of the track and the usable energy, and it's relatively simple thing to address. So yeah, I think
it's sort of a point you want to make to the occasional armchair observer. I'm not going to name any names, but you can work out who they are, who would just have a flat out race, but it doesn't work like that, does it? Actually, flat out races are intrinsically more boring.
Yes, exactly. In Formula E, that's the case because at the end of the day, you get so little overtaking, you get so little chance for these drivers to overtake. It is genuinely track dependent. So, for instance, this is very difficult for overtaking. So is London. But then again, we were both in Portland and we saw how it's totally different. It's like watching a different championship. I mean, completely different. And Berlin was the same, and to an extent, Jakarta was the same. Or Jakarta's a bit more difficult because it's so dusty offline. So, I mean, the one thing that I would say in defence is, look, you've got a championship with different circuits, with different challenges. Is there a case for saying, well, the occasional race like this is okay? You can have a flat-out race and you can have a hierarchy. And the quickest packages.
I mean, you're right, obviously, but you're wrong in an era of instant snap social media judgment where it's all about, bang per minute and all of that. everything's judged purely on exactly how it's made you feel in that second.
Yeah.
And as you prefaced it all with, there was nothing else going on in the world of motorsport, and actually an incredibly engaging slot. 8 o'clock on a Saturday night in the UK, 9 in Central Europe. A nice afternoon slot in the US. And you want to captivate that audience, don't you?
You do.
And I'm not sure anyone would watch that and be trying to circle in their diary when the Saudi races are on.
Well, we know no one watched it anyway because we've seen the TNT figures, which I'm not going to repeat, but they are particularly hideous. But there you go. I mean, that's something to work on, obviously, for Formula E.
I think we'll probably bring that up later in the year. We'll give them a buy on round one and see if this is a one-off or something that becomes a little bit more
let's hope so.
Ongoing thing.
Let's hope so. But the fact that there were 40,000 people in the Forest was a bit.
Looked great.
Yeah, looks great, but obviously, if you, I don't know. I mean, I actually did go to the fan village for 20 minutes just before the race to have a look round, and it's great.
Have a churro.
Great atmosphere. I didn't have one of those. No, I don't need one of those, as you know. But it was
89% sugar, mate.
It was a great atmosphere, and it is a fantastic event. So you kind of feel. Does it actually matter that they have a great race? I don't know, because everyone has such a good time anyway. So maybe actually, and I'm really, on the defensive here for Formula E, actually, if you were to have a dud race, maybe Mexico is the place to have it because everyone's having a great time and it's a big fiesta anyway, and a lot of families are there. So maybe the dyed-in-the-wool fans are a minority here. But I'm doing my best to talk it up there. But
I think it is amazing how popular that race has become, and it looks brilliant seeing all those people in there. And I know from being there, they do. It's a proper fiesta, and it's an amazing atmosphere and all of that. And up until now, they've always been treated to good races. So let's just hope it's a blip and that the calculations on usable energy for Saudi. Do we know how they're going to split the races there? They're going to have a sort of long and short, or I guess you don't find out until you get there.
No, you don't find out until the couple of days before, but the assumption is that they will do that. They did do that last season. And look, 12 months ago, we were saying pretty much the same. Jake Dennis won by a country mile. Not a lot happened. If it wasn't for de Grassi being so stoical in that Mahindra, it would have been just as dull as this year. And then we went to De Ria and we had 2 great races, and then we had the lunatic races that followed in Berlin and Sao Paulo and Portland. So I'm not particularly worried about it. I think that we'll get some excellent races pretty soon, and De Ria is obviously a great challenge and is much easier to overtake. So we're going to get multiple overtakes and multiple dices coming back in Saudi, which is, like I said, only 10 days away.
Yeah, I agree, but I think we couldn't ignore it as a point. It was hard to watch that race and not get the feeling that maybe a little nap might be coming up.
We love talking stats here at The Athletic. Here's one that's super simple to remember. Discover automatically doubles the cash back you've earned on your credit card at the end of your first year with Cashback Match. That means with Discover, you could turn $150 cash back to $300. That's right. You could put it towards some memorabilia you've had your eye on, or treat yourself to a premium sports network. You earn and Discover doubles. See terms at discover.com/creditcard.
We'll get back to the pod in a moment, but first of all, let me tell you about Grammarly. Email, Google Docs, Slack, you write across multiple platforms and places during your workday, so delivering consistent, high-quality communication everywhere is key. Grammarly is an AI writing partner that helps you get work done faster with high-quality writing for better projects, proposals, presentations, and more. Best of all, Grammarly works where you work, so you can get more done no matter what tools you use. As a journalist and podcast host, I'm constantly writing and rewriting copy and drawing up scripts. It's part of the job, and Grammarly helps make it faster. It's got some really cool features like tone suggestions to help you strike the right balance between direct and friendly in work emails. Plus, Grammarly has a ton of other great features like advanced spelling, grammar, punctuation, and conciseness suggestions to ensure your writing is professional, mistake-free, and clear. Get AI writing support that works where you work. Sign up and download for free at grammarly.com/podcast. That's GRAMMARLY.com/podcast. Easier said, done.
We mentioned Guenther taking probably a surprising fourth place. I think it's fair to say a really solid start to the season for that Maserati. Deruvula struggling on his debut, as I think we'd sort of suggested he might do in the pre-season preview.
Yeah, I was really pleasantly surprised for Maserati MSG. I thought they did a great job considering the tumult over the last sort of 3-4 months or so. Lots of changes there, lots of new faces in that team, and they did a great job. Max Guenther was superb, possibly deserved a podium for the way that he hung that Maserati out. He fought back from that shunt, don't forget, in free practice he hit the wall at the Peraltada and broke the suspension on that car. They recovered superbly from that, and they had really strong pace. So yeah, a big surprise for me, and I probably owe them an apology for suggesting that they'd tank this season. But I still think
had faith.
I still think they won't have as strong a season as last season. But again, I got proved wrong, and happy to hold my hands up and say well done, Max Guenther and Maserati MSG. Nice performance and a good way to start their season. And Deruvula just did what he had to do and get a bit of experience and keep his nose clean and out of trouble. And he did that. Not a spectacular performance, but at least something to build on. So yeah, I think on the basis of that, they'll all be very positive heading to De Reer in a few days' time.
Over in the sister Stellantis team at DS Penske, Vern having the upper hand again, but a bit of a nothingy result for them, just sort of slim pickings point wise.
Yeah, I mean, I think if there's one team that kind of got the results that they suggested they would, it's probably DS Penske. Not spectacular, but solid, reasonable job. Stoffel van Dorn looked much better in qualifying on one lap pace, which will please him. But I think there's just a realisation there that they can only do so much, and they can get top 6, which they did in Mexico, and they can get double points finishes for the team. But it takes generally it will take the difficulties of others to get anything beyond that. That's not to say it won't happen. I think they will get podiums this season. A win might be a bit of a stretch this campaign, but yeah, I mean, nothing spectacular, solid, good points. But yeah, like I said, I think entirely what was forecast for them heading into the season.
The only other point scorer we haven't mentioned, Jake Hughes, solid 7th. Not a bad start to the season, all told, for Neon McLaren.
Yeah, that's right. And a bit like Guenther, he fought back from a shunt in free practice 1, although his was more damaging. It was a really strange accident. He sort of locked up going into turn 1 and then looked like he was going to back out and go down the escape road and then didn't and hit the wall. It was a really small shunt, but with really serious implications, because I've seen some pictures actually of the car, and it's one of those things where you go, that can't be the chassis that's been in the accident, because
really?
he probably hit the wall at like 20 miles an hour. Yeah. But unfortunately it looks like the wheel or the wishbone has come through and taken a big chunk out of the tub.
Really?
I mean, it looks like a really big smash, but it's just,
20 miles an hour?
Yeah, unfortunate the angle got it. I don't, because they've got the front powertrain kit now in the just at the front of the tub.
Yeah.
And I often wonder if that sort of exacerbates the accident damage.
Yeah, I mean, got a bit that weight there to keep it
potentially. But I think on this occasion it was genuinely the suspension that caused the tub to be damaged that way. I'm told Gary Paffett told me that it is repairable. It'll go back to Dallara, but obviously they had to change the survival cell overnight, which they did. And yeah, great performance by Jake Hughes. I mean, he was really strong in Mexico City last season, and he proved again that he's got a good affinity for that place and got a great 7th place. So strong start. Sam Bird, not so good for him. He had the team made a wrong call in qualifying. He didn't make it to his second quick lap. They got the countdown wrong, and then in the race they went with a sort of alternative strategy, keeping the second attack mode quite late, and it just went against him and he lost track position and ended up down the field. So tough start for Sam, but he'll be back. He's won at De Reer before, and he was strong there last season with a podium, so I'm sure his points collation will start pretty soon.
Not much else of note to talk about, but I guess the rebranded ERT team need a bit of a shout. The Formula E admins did the usual thing that happens to Dan Ticktum and picked up something that he said on the radio and broadcast it. But he was right to have a bit of a huff, wasn't he, when he came across a discarded piece of bodywork on his qualifying lap?
Yeah, he hit de Vries's, I think it was his damper cover, wasn't it, if I remember rightly. I didn't
was being suitably vague because I couldn't remember what it was.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, I don't think Dan was that happy. There's a realisation, actually, that he's going to have a long season and he's going to have to fight for it and try and enjoy it. I'm not sure how much you can enjoy fighting for 14th, 15th, 16th positions when you're as competitive as he is. But yeah, it's going to be... I think I wrote actually after the race that they have now reverted back to the wooden spoon team, which is harsh, but the reality of the situation. And I think they've got probably bigger things to worry about in terms of their future and what structure they might be for beyond this season. I think off-track events I think they need some investment and they need to get their future outlined more than this season. I think that what goes on the track obviously is important and keeps the morale up in the team, but they off-track they've got a lot of work to do, I think, to secure their future in Formula E.
Probably ought to mention de Vries's return to Abt. Probably didn't get off to the best of starts. What happened there that prevented him from making the start?
Yeah, I mean, he had an off, I think, on the first lap or the second lap. Can't remember now. Very early in the race, he smoked the wall. He'd gone off during his running qualifying and spoiled his qualifying lap and damaged the car. And then in the race, a similar incident, albeit not his fault, which was a brake-by-wire issue, I believe, which caused him to go off. And that was it. No more miracles of Mexico. I think he's exhausted those over the years, hasn't he? So he was due a bad one, was Lucas. But shame, because it was the 100th race for Abt, and obviously Lucas's return to the team. So I mean, the disasters on the track apart, he looks a much more relaxed and engaged individual than he did for most of last season. Albeit the irony, of course, is that he's in the same car. Nico Mueller showed some decent pace in free practice, and
there'll be better days for that team, won't there? I think so. They'll pull a couple of results out.
Yeah, I think there was no hint that they were going to really get into the points during the weekend, I feel. But other tracks will suit them a bit better. And I again, a bit like ERT, they're going to be treading water a bit this year and just hoping for others to fall off and for them to try and get some points.
Now, conspicuously, there's one team we haven't mentioned, and that's Mahindra. So let's hear what team boss Fred Bertrand said when Sam caught up with him before we recorded this show.
So thanks very much for joining us, Fred. Hope you got back from Mexico and the first race of the year well. So how are things at your end of the pit lane?
Hi, good morning, Sam. I think on our side, Mexico was an interesting weekend with different feelings, a bit of frustration after quali, because we really thought that we were able to do much better than what we did. But some satisfaction after the race, where we saw that the pace we were able to showcase was definitely better than last year on the same type of track. So let's say good and less good things, but in general, on the path of progressing as planned, nothing really special.
In terms of Nyck's return, Fred, it was highly anticipated. Obviously, a former champion of Formula E. It was fair to say it was reasonably low key, but I guess in some ways that was expected for Nyck with such little running heading into the season.
I think Nyck, you get what he proposes, and I mean there is nothing we were not expecting on Nyck's side. To be honest, I think the first thing where we really appreciate is the spirit. Is really very, very close to all the people in the team, trying to listen, trying to understand, trying to compensate the lack of track time he didn't get last year on the Gen 3 car. So he's learning very quickly, and definitely the way he's behaving is really appreciated in the team. Secondly, on the motivation side, is on a very high level of motivation. He's expecting a lot from everyone, but he's also expecting a lot from himself. So that's definitely something where we also like to have that feeling into the team. On the pure pace, we didn't give them a good car. It's the same for Edo, to be honest, on the quali and on the free practices. So it's difficult to get any conclusion there. But the pace during the race was very satisfying there. He was definitely able to follow the pack. And for sure, he gets a lot of learnings after that first race. So we definitely think that he's now 100% back and fully committed. Riyadh is a good track for him. He knows that track and likes that track. So we hope that he will be able to raise one step higher the level of his driving, but also of our full team in Riyadh. So we are very happy on the way he's getting integrated and keeping the pace and keeping the push after Mexico.
I think it's fair to say, Fred, that before the start of the season, before Mexico, that your expectations and objectives were in check. There was a reality of what you may be able to achieve this season. Has that changed at all after the first race in Mexico?
No, I think the way we evaluated our capabilities is already quite ambitious, because we would really like to be able to close the gap between the middle of the pack, let's say, and that was not the case in quali again, but during the race we were able to follow the Nissans, McLarens, which for us is already a good target if we can make sure that we get that group. So no, the plan is exactly the same, learning, progressing, but we see some potential. That's the good thing, and let's say what we have now is that we have more confirmation that the plan we have is the one we can achieve. So there are no excuse or no reason why we shouldn't target that plan to happen, and we would really like to come back into the top 8 to 6, let's say, and that's where we need to be, and that's what we will push for.
We saw a bit of a change team in Mexico, Fred. A lot of new faces in the team. Still some that we know and recognise. But as a cohesive unit, as a squad, how pleased were you? The functionality, the operational element of the team, and how it went about racing in Mexico.
You're right. I think there are a lot of new faces, and it was probably the first time we had all those faces together. Because Valencia was not the case, and on top we know that Valencia was not an easy moment for us. The good thing to come to Mexico and to get a team together is that the excitement you get through the event, with so much people coming, the crowd really expecting our drivers to just sign an autograph, and that a lot of enthusiasm. This is something which gets transferred to the team, and people are all excited to be part of that event. If we come back to exactly what was the spirit into the team, I would say first day, discovering people, in some cases, learning how to work together. But very quickly things got into place, and we got a spirit and an atmosphere into the team, which was really my first satisfaction, I would say, for the weekend. We felt that people were happy to be together. We're happy to get challenged together, because having Jeremy joining the team, I can tell you that the level of challenge and pressure is getting a bit higher than we were used to, and that's really good. So, but everybody was keen and happy to get that level of challenge and pressure. So, very good atmosphere, very strong motivation to make the team progress. It was a first, so definitely a lot of things to improve in the way we executed things. But already the level was very encouraging for the next races, because we had no major issue, good strategy, good way of working. And the second part, which is more the spirit we feel when we come back to the factory and when we arrived and we had the debrief yesterday and Monday, is that the people were also happy, listening, and working already on Riyadh, no one was unhappy. So it was a good satisfaction that no one got frustrated during the weekend, and everyone was coming back with a lot of energy.
We spoke in Mexico, Fred, but for our listeners on the podcast, just sort of reiterate the part of your job, which I'm sure you find quite interesting and challenging at times, which is to do what you've just said there, which is to manage the expectations, but also keep the morale going during a season when I think realistically it's going to be difficult for you to get big points at most of the races. How is that sort of, how does that build the sort of team ethos within Mahindra?
A very good question. I think first is important that people don't over expect, but on the other side, we must not undermine the level of expectation we want to have. So we have to find a balance between the two. I totally agree with you that scoring big points this season will be particularly difficult. I think probably even more difficult than last year. We were lucky last year to score at the first one a lot of points, which helped us. And this season it will be more difficult. When we look at the differences between all the drivers and all the cars, it's so little that it will be difficult to compensate the small gaps we have. But on the other side, we will have opportunities. So what we need to make sure is that we have a level of execution which is at each event as strong as possible, so that any opportunity which may happen, we will take it. And that's the spirit right now we have in the team, is more on nobody is really expecting us. So let's make people get what they don't expect. And let's make sure that we can get those few opportunities transformed into good points when it happens. And for the rest of the event, let's make sure that we score as many times as possible, 1-2 points. And at the end of the season, it might be a good amount. So that's definitely the target, not to lose any opportunity. And anytime we can score a few points, we will get them. And for the rest, let's learn, let's build a team, let's make sure that we capitalize and that we also start to prepare season 11. But I don't want to give up on 10 yet. It's only one race. We were not far from the pace of the best. So let's make sure that we can reiterate that at each event.
Yeah, and just looking forward to 2025, Fred, obviously it's a big year for everyone in terms of the Gen 3 Evo, or the Gen 3, whatever you want to call it, the update on the present car. Where are things at? Just give us a bit of an appreciation in terms of where you're at in the timeline of your package, and then when you're going to be bench testing, when you're going to be looking at track testing that car later on this year.
Yeah, I think that's one of the challenging part of the season, is that we are not a big team yet, and we need to do in parallel two important tasks. One is to compete at the highest possible level we can, and on the other side, we need to keep the development of the evolution of the car for 11 and 12, which for us will be two important seasons, because we really expect to be able to showcase a level of competitiveness which will go one step higher. We know 11-12 will still be kind of a transition. We will probably have to wait for 13-14 and Gen 4 to see the real capabilities of Mahindra to compete with the best. But definitely 11-12, we are working on getting ready to have the car hitting the track probably around May, if possible a bit before, and make sure that we can have this time a preparation which is much better than the one we had for Gen 3. We were late on Gen 3, having not so much time to test and not so much time to be ready before starting the season with a proper development. So in that case, we anticipate as much as we can. But between two seasons like this, it's very tough. So yeah, target is hitting track in May latest, and then be able to deploy a development program until homologation, and then be ready for the next season.
And just bringing it back to what we saw last weekend, we've been debating on this podcast about the race, which I think it's fair to say was one of the less exciting, one of the less incident, one of the more incident-free races in Formula E. Fred, thoughts on that? Because Mexico is such a great event in terms of the the crowd that they get there and the atmosphere. And it's a bit sad that they didn't get a race that lived up to that, in a sense. I mean, have you got any thoughts on maybe what can be improved next season? You are, after all, your previous job was part and parcel of all that. So it's quite interesting to get your opinions on maybe how they can change the circuit or the usable energy or a combination of the two for next season. What are your thoughts?
First, I'm happy to be in my job now and not to have to take care of that side. It's always a difficult compromise on how to make a race exciting, because you never know what will happen, and some events in the race might create it very exciting, and some other might make it a little bit less exciting. I still believe Mexico is exciting because it's the start of the season. We all discover a lot from the capabilities of the teams and of the drivers. We see that the forces are probably also closer than ever in the championship, and that makes overtaking a bit more difficult. When you look at Mexico from the past years, I'm not sure that the other races were so different than the one we had this year. There is always one fact which had made the race very exciting. I remember the one where Lucas overtook Pascal on the finish line. If you look at the race before, it was not the most exciting one, but that last move made it very special. So maybe was missing that specific move to make this one a bit more special. But in general, as you said, it's so good to race in front of those fans, to see that crowd so excited and enthusiastic. I would say Mexico is for this already very exciting race. For the fans watching on TV, and that's maybe one of the things which is more difficult to transfer, all that level of enthusiasm. I can understand that it's frustrating when the race is a bit more quiet and calm. To improve, you always have to play with the level of energy management, how much energy you give to the drivers, and how much laps you decide to have during the race. It's always a challenging decision because you are based on simulation and you never know what reality will really be. But definitely that's one of the tools Formula E has, and that's why I think there is always a big chance to get excitement back. If one is boring, the next one can be great, because you have that tool. And the second is probably make sure that the track we use understand the new characteristic of the cars. But definitely Mexico has been a good track for years. So if one year it's a bit boring or a bit more or a bit less entertaining than the previous years, it's not a drama. Let's make sure that the rest of the season is entertaining. And let's make sure that the next Mexico is entertaining again, and everything will be forgotten. So I'm not so concerned on that side. I think as long as we keep the people and the public coming and have that excitement on the event itself, it's nice. And to keep people on TV excited, we need to make sure that the number of laps and the energy given is fine-tuned in a way to optimize the show. That's probably the easiest tool to use to make that happen.
Excellent. Thanks very much, Fred. Great for you to join us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Well, always good to hear from someone like Fred. He's got a amazing experience across the championship on both sides of the fence, Sam. But it's going to be another, like you say, for some of the other teams, a difficult and long season. Probably same applies to them, right?
I think so, yeah. I mean, what I sense from just observing and speaking to Mahindra personnel, including Nyck de Vries as well, is that the morale in the team is much improved from last season, and everybody appears to now be sort of pointing in the right direction and focusing on that all-important 2025 when they have their fresh package. They can only do so much with what they've got at the moment. I think on occasion in the early part of the season, Edo Mortara will be able to get some points with that car. Nyck de Vries had quite a low-key return to Formula E. He was at the back for most of that race, but did get some clear air running, did learn a lot. You know, we know that he's had very few laps in that car compared to others after the fire in Valencia, and then the compensation test been mostly rained off. So I've got to definitely give him time. I wouldn't expect Nyck to be doing anything anything.
It was way too early to make judgments on.
Yeah, I think let's see how things look around Monaco and after that. But yeah, I mean, a happier team, but obviously they have to maintain that through this season. It's going to be a bit of a test of character on occasions, as was Mexico.
Right, well, I think we've picked all the meat off the bones that was the Mexican EPrix, but of course, wouldn't be one of our shows without Sam dipping into his notebook to bring us some news. So fire away, what's happening behind the bins in the paddock?
Well, just the two bits of news, really. There is going to be a Manufacturers' World Championship next season, which most of the manufacturers I spoke to said was well overdue. It makes all kind of sense. We've got a drivers and teams, so let's have a manufacturers one. Yeah, full stop. I don't think there's any argument against not having one.
How would that work? So, say for example, this weekend, would Jaguar have nominated Jaguar as their scoring team? So would they have picked up Cassidy points, or would they have picked up? Yeah, the points.
It's a good question. It's one that I asked. They've not gone into the nitty-gritty of it yet. So, I mean, it's a good point because it sort of leads on to our next news point, which is what if what if one manufacturer is supplying two privateer teams, which is entirely feasible and possible next season, because the app team, which by the way confirmed that they have split with Mahindra for next season. Obviously they'll continue this season working with them, but they will have a new manufacturer partnership for 2025. The assumption, and it is an assumption, nothing has been formalised as I understand it, that they will have a Porsche powertrain for next season. That seems to be the favourite and the preferred option for them, whether it is known as a Porsche or whether it's white labelled as Cupra, which is in the VW family, of course.
Makes sense.
That could happen. Equally, they may go with another manufacturer, but the strong suspicion is that they're very close to something with Porsche. And then obviously you've got 6 Porsches on the grid, so numerically then there has to be a fairness of how you tot up the points for the new Manufacturers' World Championship. So that'll be thrashed out in the coming months, and I'm expecting a confirmation of a Manufacturers' World Championship later this season.
Nothing else, or you drop a little teaser, or how are we playing this?
I'll tell you what, let's drop a little teaser. There's going to be a very significant announcement on Monday the 22nd of January. We can't go into much more than that, but it's quite exciting, quite intriguing. And
I say
on the whole,
intriguing is definitely the word. It's very intriguing.
On the whole, I think could be an interesting pointer as to where Formula E is going, constitutionally, commercially, sportingly, everythingly for the future. So, yeah, watch out for that one. It'll be on the -race on Monday the 22nd, and you're going to be frequenting the occasion, VW. So you can.
I believe so. I shall be indulging in canapes and orange juice because I'm still doing dry January. So
very good. Dry January. What's that?
It's just a little bit of payback for exceedingly wet December.
Good. I blame you for all the global warming and climate crisis. Then, if that's the case.
I'll take a small amount of blame. Right. Well, on that sort of mini cliffhanger, you'll be keen to look out for the news that Sam drops, depending on when you listen to this, but it should be early next week. Yeah. Thank you for listening. We'll be back post Daria, and speak to you soon. Bye bye.
The Athletic.